Joe Taylor. Welcome to the Pirate.
Thank you.
So let's start with a bit about who you are and what you do and what your qualifications are.
My name is Joe Taylor. I fly Part 135 within the state of Alaska, primarily in Beechcraft Kingers and the Beech 99.
Yep.
I hold multi-engine commercial and ATP, as well as CFII, II, and MEI.
I didn't know you were ATP rated.
Mm-hmm.
When did you pay for that yourself or?
No, when I went to work for Raven
Oh, that's right.
on the 1900, I got typed and I got the ATP at the same time. Yeah.
Nice.
You're very nuzzly, aren't you?
Amber. Oh my god.
This is the most affectionate any cat has ever been to me.
Amber. She's like right on top of your mind.
See, I told you we were going to get some animal mic action. Oh,
so you moved up from Amber. Get down a little bit. There you go. Okay. You can get love right there.
Yeah, I moved to Alaska in May 2022 after I concluded my term as a flight instructor for the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. And that year I had also been captain of the UND flying team. So I bought a one-way ticket to Anchorage and had all 300 pounds of my life in 2 suitcases, a tote, and my backpack, and landed in Anchorage, spent one night in the hotel, and loaded all of my stuff into a Bonanza the next morning, and Tanner Taft flew me out to Port Ellsworth. And I moved into a little dorm room out there.
So did you have all that arranged before you got to Alaska? Or
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they knew I was coming. Yeah.
Nice. So then you were initially hired as an instructor out there in Port Ellsworth.
I was, yeah. So I was hired by True North Aviation, which is the flight school owned by the Ellsworth family in Port Ellsworth, and I started instructing in their Skyhawk. There wasn't a whole lot of students out there, so I wasn't flying a ton right off the bat, but I was blessed to very quickly get into the 207. And then after the 207, rapidly into the Bonanza, as well as flying Part 91 in the Navajo, flying lodge freight and lodge guests around between Port Ellsworth and Anchorage. And then in July, I got the Part 135 IFR Navajo ride, and then flew the Navajo for about 700 hours. And then in November, had my check ride in the Beech 99. And then January of 2023 was into the Kingers.
And then shortly after that, you ended up getting not only your company trainer check ride, but also your company check airman check ride. Then those were concurrent?
Company trainer I was able to do just within the company, but in order to get check airman authorization, I had to do an observed check ride with an FAA inspector on board, basically watching me give a check ride and then signing off that I satisfactorily conducted the check ride.
So when you came to Alaska, how many hours did you have? Do you remember?
About 1150.
Okay.
So not quite 1200.
Gotcha.
But, yeah, I did about 50 hours in the 207, 50 hours in the Bonanza, and then probably 50 or so hours in the Piper Navajo Part 91, and then got my IFR ride.
Wow. So you just knocked it all out.
Yeah. I did have about 300 hours of multi-time from instructing.
Yeah. So you were not only a CFI, you were a II and an MEI.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you've got the full suite. Do you have any other ratings, tailwheel, seaplane?
I do have my single engine C. The tailwheel endorsement is kind of my skeleton in the closet, or lack thereof, I guess.
Oh, really?
Because I don't have that, but
Huh.
fly all over Alaska. So.
When did you get your seaplane rating? Was that up here?
No, I did that in the summer of 2021, in between school semesters.
And have you been able to do any seaplane flying up here?
I have not flown any since I took my check ride.
Same.
Yeah.
So you got checked out as the check airman. You're doing, you were a freaking uh, rocket ship going through all the qualifications. And then you actually picked up the job at Raven, as you alluded to. And tell me a little bit about that process. And
Yeah. So I applied for the Raven job in, I think it was January or February of 2023.
mm-hmm.
I was interviewed in March, but I committed to fly for Lake Clark Air throughout the summer. They offered me the position, wanted me to start in June of 2023, but I told them the soonest I could be available is September 1st. They're like, okay, well, if we don't find anybody else, the job is going to still be yours. I forget if it was 2 or 3 months in advance, but either 60 or 90 days out from September 1st. So then we got to that point, and they're like, all right, here's your official offer. You need to make some time to get your pre-qualifications for the ATP out of the way, so that way we can proceed with training starting in September. So in August, I had to spend a week down in Dallas. Actually, before that, no. Yeah, that was right. I had to spend a week in Dallas in August, which was hot. It was like 110. Going to ATP CTP, and that was just 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sitting in a classroom with one other student plus an instructor who is a retired airline captain and flown everything under the sun with jet engines on it. Going through PowerPoints of some of the most rudimentary stuff like stalls and runway incursions and things that are basically designed to take the pilot who has never flown in a professional environment or a structured environment and make sure that the FAA has all their bases covered and can check all the boxes that, yes, you have heard about this. At least that's what it felt like. At the end of the week, we then spent, I think it was 10 or 20 hours in a full motion 737 simulator. That was kind of neat. Unfortunately, the sim slot we had was from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m.
What?
Yep. So pulled an all-nighter. Then the sim broke like right at the beginning, so then it got even longer. But anyway, in the 7.3 sim, got to do some cool stuff. A fully coupled automated Cat 3 auto land was kind of nice. Cool to watch the airplane just land itself. Got to do low visibility taxiing at like 500 or 600 RVR in the sim. And then also got to overspeed the jet and do a little bit of mock stall, mock buffet type of deal. That was kind of neat.
So the whole airplane starts to shake
Mm-hmm.
as you exceed the transonic.
Yeah, you can feel a little bit of the buffet, and then if you do get the mock tuck and the mock stall, the emphasis there is that it takes tens of thousands of feet to recover from that.
Jesus.
Just so that you can gently bring the aircraft back under control without further exceeding the flight envelope.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So what makes that different from a normal stall?
Generally, when you're backed up into the coffin corner, mm-hmm. up at high altitude, once you go transonic and have the shock waves disrupt the center of pressure and cause that mock tuck. The aircraft just wants to further accelerate. But in order to break the stall, of course, reduce angle of attack, which means you got to lower the nose, which in turn wants to speed the aircraft up. So you basically need to back out of the coffin corner by losing altitude and gently slowing the airplane down.
Wow, that seems like a trip.
Yeah.
So then you got your ATP, you came back up here, and you.
So yeah, that was August. Did ATPC in Dallas in August. Came back up to Alaska. Once I had the certificate that I had completed ATP CTP, then I could schedule my ATP written exam. So I took the written exam in August, and then did my last flight for Lake Clark Air on August 31st. And then went to Raven and did, I think it was 17 days in Denver, Colorado. And it was a week of ground school, and then a little over a week of sims in the 1900D.
So you have to go through a preliminary. The ATP CTP isn't even like the ground school.
No, ATP CTP is just all of this stuff that you should have already heard about in your flight training. And they just want to check the box before they allow you to touch the controls of a transport category airplane.
Gotcha. So then you go through and you get your ATP.
Yep. Rating. So after the week of ground school, a little over a week of sims, took my ATP and Beech 1900 type rating check ride in the simulator and passed, which was good. And after that, I had my temporary ATP cert, came back up to Alaska, did one flight in the real airplane, just to feel how the real airplane flies compared to the sim, because it's different. And then after that one quick flight, started flying rev flights for Raven. The first few were under supervision of the DO. He flew right seat while I was just getting acquainted with the airplane and the operation. And after that, it was non-scheduled 135, which meant that I wasn't flying as much as I thought I was going to be. I was hired under the premise that we were going to be running to Dutch 5 days a week, chasing bags for the dashes. That never really happened because we were hindered by the regulation that requires us to be able to operate the airplane within 60% of the available runway, which meant that we could only carry like 300 or 400 pound payload going into Dutch or Sandpoint.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Because we were unscheduled, didn't have economic authority or commuter authorization. And that paperwork was in the works with the DOT and the FAA, but it's a process that takes 2 years.
Wow.
You just really like that mic, don't you?
Like, oh, that looks edible.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you do while you were working there then, if not those?
Initially, it was a lot of Kenai flying and Homer flying. And for the first few months, that's all we did was just Kenai and Homer. And initially, I was splitting the month up between 3 captains, which means I got to fly maybe 5 days a month.
Oh, wow.
The benefit of that was I was still able to keep my foot in the door with Lake Clark and still fly for them in my off time. And I was still making a min guarantee with Raven. So even though I was only flying 15 hours a month for them, I was still getting paid for 65 hours a month.
Oh, wow.
And I still had the insurance benefits.
Nice.
401k and things like that. Eventually, we did add in Valdez and St. Mary's, and one of the 3 captains left, so it was just me and one other captain. I got to fill up my schedule more of a 2 on 2 off type of deal, and I was getting about 50 to 70 hours a month. as time progressed. Beginning of 2024, I picked up another part-time job flying 135 for Reeve Air Alaska. Mike Reeve owns Reeve Air Alaska. He's the grandson of Bob Reeve, who started Revolution Airways. And he has one full-time pilot and was looking for a part-time pilot to fly Mondays and Thursdays on an essential air service run to Golcana, which requires a multi-engine ATP because it's scheduled. And I was like, hey, I have one of those. So, uh-oh, I'm falling. Oh no. Oh no.
So then how did things end with Raven? I know they ended up shutting down their
Yeah, I have no idea what happened behind the scenes, but all I know is I think we were flying the airplane a little over 100 hours a month, summer 2024. And then somewhere around the middle of July, Dio had me come into his office, and the Dio was there, the other captain was there, and representatives from HR were there, and I was like, uh-oh, what did I do? I was like, well, you didn't do anything. We're ceasing operations on July 31st, 30th or 31st, whatever the last day of July is. And like, okay. They're like, yeah, we know you'll land on your feet. Like, yep, I got 2 other jobs. Yeah, that was that. Sure enough, on last day of July, suspended operations. Yep. It's a fun airplane to fly. I miss flying it. But thankful to still have other jobs.
So flying out here in Alaska, I'm sure you have more than one story of how things got a little hairy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any you'd be willing to share?
Yeah. Took off on a flight in the Beech 99. And most of the time when you're flying the turbines, you have the power to fly through most icing conditions or most icing encounters, and still have plenty of options available because you can climb, you can basically almost always get to an altitude where there's not as much icing. But last winter, I was climbing out of Anchorage, headed out west, I think to Port Allsworth, and right about the time we are passing Kenai but we were on the west side of the inlet. We're at 10,000 feet. It just was like someone was standing in front of the airplane with a fire hose of supercooled liquid water. And I mean, within a minute, we went from cruising along at 185 knots, indicated like normal, to below minimum icing speed of 150 knots. And center was so busy, talking, that I couldn't get a word in. So, we're headed direct to Port Allsworth, so southwest. We were about to start crossing over the mountains, so I turned and pointed us southbound down the inlet over the water, off our course, and started descending at full power at min-icing speed with passengers on board. And the lady directly behind my SIC starts freaking out because you can see the ice building on the leading edge of the wing, and then it starts building down the top side of the cockpit windows. Even with the windshield heat on, it builds up like a little, I don't know what you want to call it, a bridge or a dam up there. And it's coming off the props, constantly slamming into the side of the fuselage like a gunshot.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it getting hit by a shotgun on the sides.
Yeah.
It slips off.
So anyway, finally we get a word in with center, and they notice that we're 40 degrees off course, 30, 40 degrees off course and descending, and like, what's going on? And told them severe ice. We're just trying to get down and melt it off. Thankfully, it was above freezing on the surface, so I know that we could descend. So it keeps giving me lower, lower, lower. I was like, all right, let's just go direct the Homer VOR for something in that general direction where I know it's above freezing and we can get down below the bases. Well, even though we were once we broke out of the bases around 5,000 feet, we still weren't shedding the ice, and we still were, power up and descending at, 400 or 500 feet a minute. So eventually we got direct to initial approach fix for an RNAV approach into Homer, and then descended on the approach, and was only going to land if the ice didn't come off. So came in. Thankfully, the ice melted off around 1,500 feet. Just did a low approach, and then headed back out to the west and continued VFR below all of the weather.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that is I was able to go back and look at the area forecast and the icing forecast products that the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit puts out. There wasn't much forecasted for that day. It was just light icing forecast like there is almost every day in the winter.
Yeah.
And you look at the little icing map and it's just nothing to be seen. The one thing that I didn't look at was the Doppler weather radar. And that told a different story, and I had basically flown right through the bullseye of the darkest blue snow on the radar. So it kind of adds one more thing to my flight planning routine, is to actually look at the radar, which is not something you normally do.
No.
Flying in an area where there's not a lot of convective activity.
And that's the convective activity is what creates those super cold water droplets, that warm water off the Pacific getting pushed up the mountain range, into the Alaska mountain range, and the beginning of the Alligator range.
Yeah.
Just creating a solid wall of severe ice.
It's like the ice triangle there from Kenai down to King Salmon and over to Kodiak.
Yep.
Yep.
So now, in order to prevent that from happening again, you look at the
I check the radar and definitely pay attention to where the precip is at, and just add it to my pre-flight weather check.
And are you using my radar or Windy?
I use my radar, and then Alaska Aviation Weather Unit website actually has links to the radar straight there. I usually go to the Alaska Weather Unit site to check the area forecast, and then click through all of their graphical forecasts for icing, for turbulence, and then go to Windy to check forecast winds aloft, as well as the graphical models for forecast cloud bases and visibility, and then either for flight or the weather camera website for aircraft PIREPs and METARs. And then I do the for flight briefing for the actual recorded weather briefing when I file.
Yep. So you've arguably conquered the North. Do you have
at least my small portion of it?
Do you have big plans on the horizon? You think you're planning to stay where you are? Are you looking at anything bigger, or?
I'm slowly putting together an application packet, hopefully for Atlas, but I'm still putting the pieces together for that. I'm not really looking to go anywhere until probably the third or fourth quarter of 2025.
Yeah. Have you met my friend Andre?
No.
Well, I just interviewed him. He
Nice.
comes through here flying the triple for Atlas all the time.
Oh, nice.
I'll be back in next week. Maybe I can introduce you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great.
What about personal airplanes? Have you considered buying something to fart around up here?
I always thought about it, but I came close to making an offer on a very pristine Cessna 140, but just a little small for what I would want to do. Ideally, I'd get a 170B.
Yeah.
Or a 180. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Something you can actually move some stuff around with.
Yeah. Kind of see how the next year goes.
So for the younger guys who are looking at a long road ahead in order to get where you are, do you have advice that kept you on course or
Yeah. One of the things that I had always wanted to do since I started enjoying aviation, discovering aviation growing up, was become an airline pilot. And for the longest time, I thought I wanted to get to the cockpit of a big, heavy jet as fast as possible. Even through college, I was going to graduate in May of 2021, CFII, hit my 1,000 hours, go to a regional fly out, CRJ or an Embraer for a year or two, and then hopefully get on with Delta and just be at Delta for 40 years.
Yeah.
And that still is the goal eventually. But the summer of 2021, right after I graduated, I did an internship cloud seeding in Western North Dakota. And I got to fly the Seneca, the Cessna 340, and then the C-90 King Air. And that really opened my eyes to how fun the smaller airplanes could be. Still multi-engine,
Yeah.
but they're different mission and capabilities and different branch of aviation. And so that summer is when I ended up looking for jobs in Alaska and got in touch with the Allsworths, and they offered me a job. Long story short is, don't be afraid to branch out, try something within aviation. Just because there is so much to do and so much to see, you don't have to get to the biggest, highest paying job as fast as possible.
There are a lot better stories.
Yeah.
In other places along the way.
Yeah.
So cloud seeding was something that I wasn't very familiar with when we first met. Can you kind of quickly describe how that works?
Yeah, there's a handful of counties within the state of North Dakota that sponsor a rain enhancement and hail suppression cloud seeding mission. And what we do with the aircraft is either use silver iodide dissolved in an acetone solution, which is then burned out of wingtip tanks on basically the intake for the growing portion of the storm. So before the air goes into the mature storm clouds, we're out there feeding the smaller feeder clouds that are bringing in a bunch of that air. And the silver iodide molecule is very, very close to naturally occurring ice condensation nuclei. And the goal there is to provide, again, an ice condensation nuclei for the supercooled liquid water within the thunderstorm to create ice, to create essentially a snowflake, which will then fall out as a raindrop rather than allowing the supercooled liquid water to turn into a hailstone.
And that happens when it circulates several
That helps
times.
when you circulate, and then rides through the thunderstorm as supercooled liquid water.
And so by using these synthetic nuclei, you're creating something that has a surface area to mass ratio that's in excess of the convective action that would keep a.
No, it's still suspended, but it's causing the ice causing the supercooled liquid water to turn into more of a snowflake. And once that process starts to happen, you can really have a significant impact if you can just jumpstart it at the right time. because once it happens and once one is created, they bump into each other and you have a chain reaction. You can do the same thing we call that base seeding. You can also top seed, where we would take the king air and fly through the same feeder clouds, but on top of them. And there's a dry ice hopper in the airplane, and we're dropping pelletized dry ice. It's like the size of peas out the bottom of the airplane. And what that does is because the dry ice is so cold, it forces the water to turn into an ice crystal rather than collecting as a hailstone. And again, once you start forming ice crystals, the chain reaction kicks off.
And it follows the snowflakes
and eventually rain. Yep.
Wow.
That's the simplified version.
Yeah.
I forget all the fancy names for everything, but
nice. So when you were in school, did you pay for all of that yourself, or did you?
I was very fortunate and blessed to have lots of scholarships. In high school, I was very driven and motivated by my dream of becoming an airline pilot, and so I was able to apply for scholarships while I was still in high school to help fund my college education and my flight training. And several of those were renewing scholarships, so every year I was able to get a significant portion of school covered by my scholarships. My parents had also started a 529 education plan after I was born, so I was able to use that towards my flight training costs. And then I was also a resident assistant for the University of North Dakota during, let's see, when was that? 2019-2020 school year, which means that I had my food paid for and I had my housing paid for.
Nice.
So that cut out a big living expense for that year of college.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in going after these scholarships, you had to write for them.
Mm-hmm.
Did you create a system to?
Yeah, I basically had, a template of tell us about yourself and why do you want the money and what's your dream.
Yep.
Why should we give you this large sum of money?
I did the same thing. I had a master sheet
Mm-hmm.
of the 10 answers.
Yep.
And I just copied and pasted.
And you got to go through and make sure that you change, fill in all the right blanks for the right names.
Yep.
Yep.
Search and replace.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, Joe Taylor.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming on the Fire Up.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.